Can Eric Greitens beat the accusations? The governor has the St. Louis Circuit Court to worry about. He also has the Court of Public Opinion to worry about. And big businesses and guns. Will cutting ties with the NRA, okay, pardon the pun, backfire? Or will the public say the decisions are, all right, again, I'm sorry, hit the target? And for the other criminal defendants in our state, there aren't enough public defenders right now. Let's talk about why it all matters. This is Across the Aisle. There's a lot to cover this week. I'm Mike Ferguson. Let's meet our panel of political pundits for the week. She is the fearless leader of the Lindenwood University Collegiate Democrats, Jessie Basler. He is the fearless leader of the Hammond Institute for Free Enterprise and fearless leader of opinion on Twitter, Dr. Howard Wall. He is the fearless leader of the Missouri Policy Journal, Dr. Joe Cernik, and he is among the fearless leaders of the Lindenwood University College Republicans, Moses Milan. Well, for the first time in Missouri's history, a sitting governor is under indictment. Now, here's the question. Is this a matter of unethical behavior catching up with a rookie politician, or is it about partisan opponents weaponizing the courts? We're going to talk about that in just under 10 minutes. But let's get started, like I said, with the plight of other criminal defendants in our state, those who are not the governor at the time. Missouri Public Defender Michael Barrett has been saying for years that there aren't enough public defense lawyers. So in one county, he's contracting the work out to private attorneys. Joe Cernik, public defenders are a crucial part of our judicial system. Is it a bad thing that we're contracting it out to the private lawyers?
No, I don't think this is bad. I know the American Bar Association report on this has us at 370 statewide public defenders, and that they are doing 80,000 cases with about 216 caseload each. But what you tend to look at then is their recommendation. It needs to be doubled. So let's assume that's not going to happen. There's not going to be any 100% increase. The governor was talking about a bit of an increase in the budget. The state legislature said a little more. So they're not going to happen. You're going to be looking at the idea that the ABA report on this is rather interesting, because then they break down how many hours is spent on each type of case, which is an interesting side note, because in this then you're looking at, you have about 300 murders in the state on an average every year, and St. Louis is number one in the country with 60 murders per every 100,000, and Kansas City is 12th with 30 murders per every 100. So that's where the bulk of them is. So as a result, this seems to be the best you're going to get to, is privatization seems to be needed.
Moses, if we don't have good defense attorneys, that's a constitutional duty. The justice system doesn't work, but there's no shortage of departments in the state capitol saying we need more money.
Absolutely. I think the right to an attorney, the defense based not on how much money you have, but based on your right as a citizen, I think that's a fundamental right. And what I see here is actually a very good plan as a way to help people who are financially troubled get the defense they need. Joe brought up the hours, and the ACLU has actually sued the state because so few hours have been devoted to each case. So I think it's a great idea.
I think that's sort of, though, where you're going to end up seeing, if somebody's found guilty, that you're going to then refer to how much time was spent on it. And that's what we'll wait for.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think public defense is woefully underpaid, woefully understaffed. They were referencing that the public defenders they have now are overloaded with cases. And the issue is you're not only allowed an attorney, you're allowed an effective attorney. And these people aren't getting the representation that they require because the people that are actually defending them are so overloaded. And while I agree that privatization might be a short-term kind of solution for the issue, I would rather look at mandates for public defense to be paid for by the state and more gratuitous amounts, and public defense kind of being opportunized by incoming lawyers. I feel no one wants to serve as a public defender. You're not making a lot of money or fame, but I feel that it's kind of a requirement and, in my personal opinion, a due to your community.
If we had that kind of requirement, Dr. Wall, could the numbers still add up for the state?
Well, I think what Allison suggested, or what's being suggested, is much, much more expensive than the privatization plan, because right now the plan is to have private lawyers take up most of the minor cases. So it's something like 80% of the cases are not very serious. So it's traffic things and so on. And people can do those as part of their normal load. They just add it on, the private lawyers. And the public defenders, who are specialists, you can have a smaller number of those, and they'll focus on the major cases. So they'll be specialists in defending people, who can't afford their own lawyer, and in those types of cases. So you should get a good mix of everyone getting representation that's good and not spending
out of
a lot
those
of the money.
80,000 cases, 20,000 are probation violations. So that as a result, and then another 20,000 are CD felonies. So as a result, you're only looking at a small percentage that are going to be serious. And I think that's what you're going to find is a shift. So that then can you reduce the caseload of those approximately 370 public defenders?
Well, does this make a case then, I'll just do kind of a jump ball here, does this make a case for some other criminal justice and law reforms? Are we putting too many people in jail? I mean, you don't qualify for public defender unless you're accused of something that could result in you going to jail.
Right. Well, there are an awful lot of crimes. Like that's the one problem, and that's a longer term thing to try to fix. And the fact that so many people do need representation, and it's the ones who can't afford it, it does point to other problems. But that's not going to be fixed by spending a bit of money here and there. Like
I don't see, if you're talking suddenly, well, wait a second, where's this money coming from to have a 100% increase in the number of public defenders and assume that's going to fix the problem? No, I don't see that.
Jesse?
It's an institutional issue with these minimum sentencings, and the issue is that people would rather incarcerate than reform, and that's why America has the highest incarceration per capita, that we would rather just put people in jail and quickly put them through the system, and that's an issue with public defenders. They're usually not that effective because they're working for the government that is also prosecuting their defendants. And the issue behind that is that it needs to be a whole institutionalized reform. It just doesn't need to focus on one issue. Granted, that's going to take a lot more money, a lot more time, but overall the whole system needs to reform, not just the issue of public defense.
Moses, does that put us at risk of being soft on crime?
Well, potentially. But I think Jessie actually is onto a point that this is a symptom of something a lot bigger of a problem. I think the reason that our systems are so overloaded is because we do prosecute too many people, particularly for drug offenses. And I think decriminalizing drugs would be a great step in actually lowering the cost of not only prosecution but locking people up as well.
So what's the standard we should have?
A good example, though, for privatization might work here, where maybe it doesn't everything, but this is a good opportunity to see if it has some relevance.
Right. I think we're talking about a quality issue too. Bringing in private lawyers who are experienced and trained, and they've gone through the low-paying lawyer jobs and are very good at what they do. That'll provide an even better defense to someone who doesn't have the cash to have a really good private lawyer. And I think that taking 80% of those cases frees up the public defenders to be a lot better at the cases they're taking and focus on those cases, put in more hours to make sure the defendant gets a good defense.
All right, and you can find out more about the public defender crisis. There are some pretty good articles at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Well, still ahead, free speech, the free market, the right to keep and bear arms, and feeling safe in schools. The NRA is finding fewer business partners these days, and we'll talk about that in just under 20 minutes. But just ahead, the drama of the governor, his mistress, a prosecutor, and that photo. Well, maybe. The panel weighs in on the future of Governor Eric Greitens. It's right here on Across the Aisle.
What if you could invest in the future? The future of kids, like a stock. Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change. A whole new kind of investment called Better Futures. When you invest, it helps kids go to college. Believe in us, invest in us, watch us grow. My name is Sydney, and I'm your dividend.
Everybody wants to be popular, right? I mean, especially politicians. I'm Mike Ferguson. Thank you for watching Across the Aisle. And guess what? Eric Greitens isn't very popular right now. At least he's not as popular as he used to be. Charged with one count of felony invasion of privacy, he's not only facing a legal challenge, he's facing a political one as lawmakers have begun the very early parts of the impeachment process, although they won't call it that. And some in his own party are asking him to resign. Okay, so Howard, we've got a grand jury indictment. The circuit attorney did not take the normal route to bring a charge like this. A grand jury indictment, an investigation that is continuing. Accusations are already starting to come up from the Republican Party saying, wait a minute, this whole thing's political. This isn't criminal. This is weaponizing the courts. Do they have a point?
No, I think they do have a point, and it's not that like the governor should be let off the hook, but it's the case, as far as I see, and I've spoken to a couple of lawyers, is pretty flimsy, and there's going to be some question about whether there's actual evidence that they need to convict. And my suspicion is that if a Democratic governor had done this, then the circuit attorney in the city of St. Louis would not have charged. So it can be both that Greitens has done horrible things and that it's a political hit job. And I think that's where I'm kind of leaning right now.
I read the one-page indictment, and what I thought was interesting was it says witnesses, and it has 3 different sets of initials. I'm not sure. I doubt they were in the bedroom as she was blindfolded, but
one of them was.
Well, this,
one of them obviously, I know who she is, and I'm surprised that media and politicians aren't saying her name, and I know who the husband is too, and so does everybody else in the media and politicals around here. But I mean, is it possible that the prosecutors have already said, okay, we don't have that alleged photo?
Right.
How does this get to an indictment?
I still think it is. I think I agree with Howard. I think forget that. It's the politics of this matters. The Republicans are going to want him out of there. And the reason they're going to want him out of here is 2 things. One, they don't like him. And they'd rather have the Lieutenant Governor, Mike Parsons, in because they even talk about the idea of he's easier to work with. And you see reference quotes that are just wonderful to read. But more important, they believe this has got to affect a race with Claire McCaskill. And that as a result, that they might have a chance of beating her this year in Missouri. They can't if he stays in office.
Moses, does an Eric Greitens drama in the courts scare the Republican Party?
Well, I think President Eisenhower said it best when he said, Republicans in trouble begin to eat each other. And I think that's what we see here in Missouri. I personally think the Republican Party should stand by Eric Greitens until a time that it's actually shown that wrongdoing was done. And then I think we should call for his resignation. But that hasn't happened yet, and I don't think it will, to be honest.
Has there been enough evidence to call for his resignation, Jessie?
I think as a public opinion standard, yes, he should resign. We have the classic situation of a man in power who possibly abused that power to manipulate someone who technically wasn't giving consent to that photo to be taken of her, whether it was or not. And the issue is that once it came forward to the public, it instantly slashed his entire viewpoint in public opinion eye. Once you have that kind of drama, whether it's true or not, it's going to have a mark on your personality, your traits. People will believe in his morals as a family man. And now this whole alleged affair came out, and he convinced himself. He said, I didn't take the photo and things like that. But because there's already that mark of shame on him, it's not going away.
They got a House committee set up, and you're looking at it where it's 5 Republicans, 2 Democrats. The Democrats don't matter. They're just there for window dressing. So actually this is a Republican play. Now, they can call witnesses. So my suspicion is if you're going to call witnesses, how are you going to keep them anonymous? And so then from there, if they say, yes, there's grounds to go forward, then it goes to the Senate. The Senate then would recommend that a judge panel would be set up. And so that's sort of the procedure. So I think that this is being done because they want him out of there. They don't want him to have an impact in any adverse way that guarantees that McCaskill gets reelected.
Now, the problem that Governor Greitens had when he was elected is that he ran against the Missouri Republican Party.
Right, yeah.
He was calling them names and actually quite childishly at times, telling them to get back to work, and they're citizen legislators. And they don't really care for him that much. Yeah. He was as much of an enigma to them as he was to everybody else. And he doesn't have the political support of the party in general. So they don't want to damage the party, so they'll try to minimize that. But he doesn't have very many friends in the legislature, so he's shot himself in the foot by how he got into office.
See, my issue is that it's not just political. Yes, it has a lot of political leanings, but this is a woman and her personal privacy that's being discussed, and I feel that because he is a public figure, he kind of loses the right to have that kind of private trial, and people are going to consistently want information about this.
I don't think anyone loses their right to a trial because they're accused, whether he's governor or not. There's an accusation, and it should be followed, and if it's found that he's guilty, then he should be dealt with. But the existence of an accusation and the evidence that's so flimsy, I think we have to let it play out a bit.
I agree that the trial needs to take the due course, but the issue is that he's a public figure, so this is going to be put into the limelight, and it's going to be thrust into the limelight for that reason. But the issue is that it's becoming more of an attack. The consistent thing is that it's alleged, the photo's not found kind of thing, denying that this woman's claims are true kind of thing. And I get that you have to be found guilty and proven guilty and things like that, but I think the attacks are more of, oh, this is going to ruin his career, but what about the woman's life?
Well, I'm wondering
I think I'll agree that the woman is a victim of at least two men. Greitens and her ex-husband, who is really the most horrible person in the story.
Yeah, she didn't consent to that either, that recording.
Right, and that she apparently didn't want it, but her ex-husband is sort of an instigator in this, and so it's odd that somehow he stands on the sideline. I think the case is going to be, if we're looking at May 15th as his court date, is he going to be there in court as a private citizen, as a governor? And I think he's going to be there. Well, I don't think he's going to be governor at that moment. I think the Republicans would remove him before then. And I think they're going to do it for political reasons. They don't like him as governor, and they can't work with him in the legislature, and they don't want him to hurt the Republicans in the upcoming race against McCaskill.
And by the way, I'll just say, without saying names, because nobody else is doing that, the ex-husband knows how the media works. I will just say he knows how media works.
Well, I think this is sort of like the Clinton situation with the dress. None of the mainstream media wanted to sort of state something precise until it was put into sort of an alternative media site. Then it was legitimate to cite the alternative site. I'm wondering whether that's what you would see here.
Right. I personally have a lot of questions about the tape. From my understanding, it was fairly long, and yet the only segments of it have been released. So what I'm wondering is why isn't the rest of the tape being released? And further than that, she went on to have a consensual relationship after that point. So my question is, why did she continue to have a relationship with him if what he did was wrong to her?
So many opinions. We'll probably come back to this as time progresses. Well, coming up, the call for more gun control laws follows another tragedy. Are we caught up in a knee-jerk emotional reaction, or is this exactly when we should be talking about guns, rights, and the law? Now, you know our panel has opinions on that. Stay with us right here on Across the Aisle. You know, there are more ways than one to make changes. You can call your congressman or woman, you can march and you can protest, although I'm not sure that changes much anymore. And you can try to starve your political opponents of financial support by convincing their supporters to cut ties with them. The National Rifle Association, although it did not pull the trigger at the high school in Florida, is defending itself against accusations of being at least partially responsible for gun crimes. Their 5 million plus members aren't getting as many discounts and deals these days because some businesses say they don't want anything to do with the NRA. Jesse, we've got clearly a Second Amendment discussion to have right now. We also have the emotional appeal of people saying we have to do something. Is gun bans part of the solution? Are gun bans part of the solution?
I think specific gun bans are the solution. I'm a supporter of people legally having guns as long as they go through the process, they get their license just as they will with a car. The issue is more so people with privatization sales and issues like that. But these companies are fully in their power to, first of all, stop selling these weapons, as many of them have, stop supporting the NRA financially, and stop giving out discounts. Discounts aren't comparable to human lives. Your loss of your discount is nothing compared to the loss of a child that the parent faces. My issue behind it is that this is kind of a flashpoint in the media, and we should have been discussing it 30 years ago when these issues started to arise. And I think that these companies need to have these different sources, and they can make these political movements as they are, even if they're just companies, because they have the platform to do so. They have these supporters, they have multiple customers, and that's where they're going to hit people the most, is the wallet.
I mean, this is a free market decision if they're saying, I don't want to do business with you anymore.
Well, the
right?
businesses can do whatever they like, and an awful lot of it is just simple virtue signaling, because these discounts were not the reasons that people were in the NRA. And NRA membership has shot up dramatically in the last few days as it's been attacked, especially given that for this particular instance, it was just unbelievable incompetence in the local law enforcement that really was responsible for more than anything. But I do have to go back. Jessie mentioned whether that gun owners have to be licensed, which is a completely unconstitutional notion, because rights in the United States are not granted by the government. They need to be taken away for a good reason. So licensing of handguns is not allowed in the United States.
My concern is to blame this on the NRA. That doesn't mean you have to be a supporter of them. Democracy in America goes to the few, the loud, and the organized, and that's what they are. And instead of having people that want to have some degree of gun regulation, I hate this term gun control because it reduces everything to a simple either or, and that's ridiculous. That's not true. But what happens then is you end up saying, stop sort of expecting the NRA to do something, understand why they're effective, and act like them, which is to sit down and actually call your member of Congress. I wanted to see students stand up at that CNN town hall meeting and say, I'm registering to vote. I'm going to encourage people to call my city councilman, to call my sheriff, to call my state legislature. We're going to actually have a voice. That's not the fault of the NRA. That's the fault of people that don't understand how the system functions.
Well, I'll say most of the people calling for more gun controls and gun regulation are, I mean, it's in the press, the media, and even politicians are completely ignorant about guns. They can't get the difference between semi-automatic and automatic straight. So they're calling for bans of all semi-automatic weapons. They're saying machine guns were used. So there's an awful lot of rank stupidity.
See, I don't worry about them, because once you write the laws,
well, but they're the ones writing the laws.
You know.
And they're going on public opinion, saying, oh, there's public opinion for doing this. But yes, the public is against machine guns. Well, they were banned in 1935. There weren't machine guns, and there's no such thing as assault rifles being, that's a machine gun. And the talk about the AR-15 as some murderous death weapon, it's no more murderous, or it's actually less deadly than most hunting rifles that people use that have been around for decades. And it just looks scary is its worst thing. So it's very, very difficult to write a law that will both be effective against these school shootings and be constitutional. And I think a lot of people know that, so they just bluster and lie about it because they know they can't come up with a law that will have any bite.
All right, Moses?
I think the most disappointing thing about the Never Again movement is the fact that we haven't seen any actual policies be put forward. We've seen a lot of moral outrage, a lot of blaming the NRA, but we haven't seen any actual plans put forward. No specific policy that we can go off of. Again, you hear this phrase, weapon of war. The Congressional Service Report has studied mass shootings, and they have a database of every mass shooting, and they found that less than 10% of mass shootings will be committed with an AR-15 or an assault weapon type gun. And unfortunately, the people in the Never Again movement don't know this. They don't know a lot of other facts surrounding firearms and gun violence in the American country. And I think if they did, their message would be a lot more different.
No, I don't think so. Some lack of technical knowledge doesn't mean you can't go ahead and make policy. And then the policy evolves through sort of rulemaking, which then has court cases.
Well, but this is the problem. It's define an assault rifle. Yeah. And they define assault rifles by how it looks. So they'll ban scary-looking handles. So this is what they did in New York after the Newtown massacre. New York banned scary-looking guns. So you made guns that didn't exactly fit the description, but had exactly the same power, exactly the same effectiveness, but the law was still not being broken. And it was because it's all cosmetic. And the problem is that you need to know these details because it's not easy to write a law that balances the rights and safety.
But you could write a law that makes them feel people feel better one way or the other. Jessie.
Exactly. It's all public opinion. I get this. The majority of the public doesn't know specifications of certain weapons, but like Moses said, there is no policy being put forward. This public outrage happens every time we have mass shootings. People get so up in their emotions because it is an emotional situation. Children are dying in their schools. The issue is because they have that policy. Everyone's afraid to do it, and the reason they're afraid is because the NRA is responsible. They donate to these campaigns. They donate to these lawmakers and things like it. Make a policy that's going to anger the lawmakers, and lawmakers aren't going to make a policy that's going to affect their pocket because they get these donations from the NRA and things like that. They're not going to alter it.
The NRA gives very few political donations. They give quite a bit, but as all donations go, the NRA is not the donor.
And again,
the NRA's political power is not from money; it's from the millions and millions of gun owners.
5 million.
That's why they're in the NRA, is because there's millions and millions of voters.
And that's what people that want to have some aspects of gun regulation need to be aware of, is to sort of model yourself after the NRA, not necessarily see them as, I don't like them, I don't want to learn anything. And the idea is, no, that's not the way politics works.
Jessie, you're going to get the last word on this.
It's not just a gun control issue, it's a cultural issue. The reason the NRA has so much support is because people believe in the system that they're trying to sell. And the issue is that guns are really popular because people think they have that freedom, they want to own that weapon, they think it's something to marvel at, but it's not. It's a murdering machine. The issue behind it is that it's a culture. The United States is very
I'm going to agree that it's a culture, and it's
people
like urban elites hate people who are different from them. They hate rural people, they hate people who like to hunt, who don't have these guns just to make themselves feel strong or anything like that. This is actually a historical thing, and they actually do have the right. You say they think they have the right. They know they have the right. And it's others don't seem to know that all of us have that right.
It is a cultural issue behind that. I'm actually from the country, and I was raised around guns, and my whole family hunts, and I understand that. But once these mass shootings came in, both my parents, who had concealed carry licenses, went through registration and training, turned in their weapons because they understand that these aren't for hunting. They didn't need them for self-defense because in that case they weren't able to do it. How many deaths
were saved because your parents, who were never going to kill anybody, don't have guns anymore? The problem is not that people who aren't going to kill are going to hand in their weapons, which is the only solution. It's that those who want to kill will have them anyway.
The issue behind it is that people aren't wanting to give up their weapons because it's the culture of I have it and you don't kind of thing. I'm going to defend myself. But in that issue, we shouldn't rely on the public to defend each other. When you have a child hitting another child with a stick, you don't give other people sticks to defend that child. You take away the stick.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Very quickly.
So, Jessie, there are 4 million privately owned AR-15s in America. What I would like to know from you is, how do you get those out of their hands? Is it a buyback? Because that's $4 billion estimated that we're going to have to spend on buybacks. And of those 4 million guns, I think the exact number was a couple hundred will be used in crimes.
I didn't see any buyback
Very
policy.
very small
I'm
percentage.
not sure where you got that, but I didn't see a buyback. The idea was you're having 2 stores saying, we're not selling these, and we're going to raise the age at which we're going to start to say you buy things.
Which I think everybody agrees that's their right. You know, they can, I mean, some of their store can sell it if they want, and they can compete.
Again, I think that's what the conversation should be about, not a buyback. Unfortunately, what we have seen on the far left is there are talks of buybacks, similar to what Australia and Great Britain have done.
And it was effective both times.
No, that's
Actually,
false.
Crime went up
That's false.
in the next 10 years.
The issue
and in
behind
our
is that
own,
people don't want to give away their guns. It's a cultural thing.
In our own assault
we have a
weapons.
Second Amendment which it says you have a right to bear arms.
For a well-formed militia, you really think that your guns are going to defend you against the U.S. military?
Well-regulated militia. Regulated means that you're well-practiced, and militia is the armed populace. It's not a formal militia, and it's not lots of regulation on a formal militia.
All right, well, we are out of time. We are not out of opinions. I know you've got yours as well. Man, what a time. So on behalf of our feisty crew of pundits and on behalf of Lindenwood University Television, thank you for watching Across the Aisle. I'm Mike Ferguson, and you know we're going to have more to say next week.